welcome back to Taxation Stuff Fest 2020. I am your host, Dre. And next up is Zoltan Istvan. He's going to come talk to us about transhumanism. Mr. Istvan is a world recognized leader in the transhumanist movement. He is running as vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party and was a Libertarian Party endorsed 2018 candidate for California governor. Let's welcome Zoltan.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. You hear me okay and everything?
Yeah, you're coming through great.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to speak about 15, 20 minutes on transhumanism, and then if anyone has any questions, I was told that we might be able to do a short Q&A for my 30-minute slot. But
Absolutely.
as I was introduced, my name is Zoltan Istvan, and I'm a transhumanist. Some of you might not know what a transhumanist is. Transhumanism is a social movement now of many millions of people around the world that want to use science and technology to radically modify the human being and also to modify the human experience. It can be anything from exoskeleton suits that allow people to get out of wheelchairs and walk. It can be things from like brain implants that might allow you to commune with artificial intelligence in the cloud. It can be things like genetic editing that allow you to cure cancer and stuff like that. Now, libertarianism and transhumanism have always gone hand in hand. In fact, transhumanism, the movement, started in the 1990s by some California philosophers, was ultimately a libertarian-led movement to begin with, because we were really, people were trying to sort of break out of the bounds of government control of science and also conservative control and just sort of any type of control of science, as you kind of know, for those in the libertarian movement, that government has a way of trying to always slow down progress. And that's something that us libertarians despise. And before I get too much into transhumanism, I want to just kind of give you a little bit of history on who I am, what part I've played in the movement, what I'm doing now for the Libertarian Party. I'm running for vice president and have been now for a few months for the Libertarian Party nomination in 2020. And also just how I've been, what I've been doing on a national scale in transhumanism. I began my career at National Geographic as a journalist in my early 20s. I'm now 47. I worked there for about 5 years and built a reputation covering a lot of different kinds of issues. I mostly, well, at least partially, was a conflict zone and war zone reporter. So I saw a lot of terrible things. One of the reasons I became a libertarian is because I saw what war zones can do. And I'm pretty anti-war to begin with. A huge part of my platform is reducing the military so we don't get ourselves in crazy foreign conflicts where we waste a lot of money and especially a lot of lives. But I had a very close call with a landmine in Vietnam that I almost stepped on covering a story for National Geographic. And it scared me so much that I really wanted to do something about the problem of death. It sounds kind of wild and crazy if you're not familiar with the anti-aging movement, but there are now, literally over $100 billion being put into people that want to overcome death, a lot of them from billionaires in Silicon Valley. But the idea is 20, 30 years ago, people started realizing it was just a matter of time before we were going to be able to rejuvenate our aging process and make it so we don't have to age anymore, as well as overcome biological death, either through 3D printed organs or stem cell injections or genetic editing or just reversing our DNA so we don't age. Either way, there's now billions of dollars flowing into this field. And a lot of people, a lot of experts, gerontologists, and everybody think that probably within 20 to 30 years, we have a very good chance of stopping aging and therefore stopping death, just either through rejuvenation technologies. And, most people die through organ failure. So we'll be able to either 3D print organs out. Of course, this is very important for libertarians because it changes a lot of politics when you talk about things like people staying 40 years at 40 years age and not having to age, things like Social Security, things like paying taxes. And of course, amongst all these improvements in the scientific world and transhumanist world are also the automation and widespread use of robotics, which eventually will probably replace a lot of labor. And that also has a lot of, political ramifications for libertarians and how we deal with the future. But through this incident that I had in Vietnam with the landmine, I got so scared after almost dying that I dedicated myself to joining the transhumanist movement and trying to help find a cure for death, which I have now been doing. And one of the very first things I did as a writer is I wrote the Transhumanist Wager. Now, some of you might know this. this is probably one of the best libertarian selling novels of this century so far. It's been compared over 1,000 times to Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, #1 bestseller in science fiction, #1 bestseller in philosophy. Just has done very well. A lot of people dislike it because it is so strongly libertarian. And also secular. It's quite non-religious. But that said, it's a really good book. So if you haven't read and you're looking for a good novel, especially in the Ayn Rand kind of vein, this is like a modern version of Atlas Shrugged, except it involves a lot of transhumanist technology stuff that Mrs. Rand had not known anything really about. But I wrote the book, and it quickly did very well and sort of launched a public career for me in the transhumanist field, where now I've gone around talking, giving lectures all around the world before coronavirus. And I've had the opportunity to consult with various governments. I've consulted with the United States military, consulted with the government of Dubai, United Arab Emirates, met presidents, been on stage with heads of state and stuff like that, discussing some of these radical technologies that are coming through the pipeline. And I've also, as a journalist, continued to write. So I had a column at Vice, a Huffington Post, places like that. Most recently, I've been writing for the New York Times opinion section. So if you want to see, for example, my latest article out about 10 days ago was on the freedom of surfing. And, surfing's been on lockdown. And well, it may seem strange to libertarians if you don't live on the coast. Those of us who do surf, there are 35 million of us around the world, haven't been able to get out into the water because the beach has been closed. So I wrote an article arguing that we should be allowing surfing during this coronavirus time. But as a journalist and with the book, I was able to launch a career promoting transhumanism around the world. And this led to a growth of the movement because I became essentially the only mainstream journalist of the movement writing endless articles. So now I've written about 250 opinion pieces for transhumanism over the last 6-7 years that have been very widespread, all in major media, covering topics from transhumanism, sex, to, what does it mean to overcome death, to, what is the future of sex robots, and, just an enormous amount of different things, genetic editing, and how will that affect the Cold War, and what do we do with an administration, like Trump and Vice President Pence, that actually are sort of against genetic editing. And, they're sort of very religiously conservative, and they don't want to be changing the human body, whereas the majority of libertarians want to change the human body, or want at least the right to change the human body, and shouldn't have the government telling them what they can do and what they cannot do. And I've gone through, these periods over the last 5-6 years where I've run a number of political campaigns. I was the 2016 presidential candidate of the Transhumanist Party, which is a small science political party. I was also the 2008 and endorsed 2018 gubernatorial candidate for the Libertarian Party. And now I'm running for the vice presidency of the Libertarian Party in 2020, and we have our nomination process. Unfortunately, without actually getting into the convention, it's a long shot for myself. But I do have, of all the vice presidential candidates, certainly the highest national profile. That said, Larry Sharpe seems to be the one who's most favored, and I do know that he's a good guy. That said, maybe people will vote for me and come out as I. One of the things that has happened about transhumanism is I've been able to show up on television and write articles and push this idea that we can overcome death, that we can revolutionize our bodies, that we can do things like create brand new sporting events through different types of exoskeleton technology, or even endoskeleton technology, where we attach pieces to our insides and make them ourselves essentially cyborgs. This is a very radical type of idea, and yet because of disability out there, this stuff is already happening. For example, it's a very good chance that people in the Special Olympics or the Paralympics, within 10 years, will have people who have no legs that will run as fast as the fastest Olympic runners with normal, healthy legs. And the reason is because they'll be using either blades or exoskeleton technology or other types of robotic technologies that allow people to do those things. In fact, I wrote an article recently for the New York Times on what we call the Cyborg Olympics also happening. Well, it might be happening now in 2021, but because of coronavirus. But the idea is that there are a lot of different types of technologies for disabled people that are allowing them to compete. And it's only a matter of time before those technologies allow them to be more competitive in the sports that most natural and able-bodied people can do, such as running or swimming and things like, or jumping or things like that. And of course, it's already kind of a fact of life that there are robots out there that can climb stairs better than 70-80% of the human population. Probably in 3 years, it'll be able to climb stairs, climb Mount Everest, and things like that, better than any human being on the planet Earth. This is the fate of transhumanism. This is kind of the specter of where the world is going, for better or worse. Now, I know a lot of it may seem controversial, and I've had the honor of kind of representing the movement as one of its main spokespersons for a long time, and also seen this technology grow. Like, some of the classic players are Elon Musk, who now has Neuralink, a company that is trying to connect your brainwaves directly to artificial intelligence so that you don't have to do an interview like this in front of an iPhone. The interview takes place in front of your head. Now, of course, there's all sorts of radical privacy issues with that, but libertarians shouldn't be afraid just because there are some issues. We should be leading the ground game because the Democrats and Republicans certainly aren't. They're just like, oh, wow, this is too weird. But libertarians have an opportunity with transhumanist technology to really take the ball and run with it and say, well, we're the political party. We're the people that understand that technology is something that shouldn't be bound by government control, by control of anything. We should let people do what they want to do with their bodies, as long as it's not hurting somebody. That we call that morphological freedom in the transhumanism movement. And that's why transhumanism is ultimately somewhat of a strong libertarian bias, is because of this concept of morphological freedom, the right that we want to ensure that anyone can do whatever they want to themselves, so long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, which is quite similar to the libertarians' non-aggression principle. But the idea is that transhumanism is growing so fast. There are so many incredible things happening besides the fact that like 20, 30 years we might overcome death. We have things like artificial intelligence. Some of the fastest supercomputers can already do something like 300,000 trillion calculations per second. I'm not sure if you've kept up with the artificial intelligence super computer war, but every few years America takes a leap, and then China comes up and takes a leap, and then we take a leap. But the fact is, these things are now doing trillions of calculations per second, and we're coming to a point when it's just, once we get the software, we're going to be creating intelligences as smart as us, and certainly far smarter, which brings up even more difficult challenges with the libertarian ideology, because you have to ask yourself, should we be giving complete freedom to a machine intelligence that could be dramatically smarter than us? And right now I've been always on the side of there should be no government control of technology. We should just let this kind of unfold. However, artificial intelligence does pose a very strict challenge. Well, at this point, I still support 100% just letting people do what they want. But if we ever come to a Terminator solution, that's when we maybe, sort of like coronavirus, we don't just let coronavirus do what it needs. We need to develop maybe some safeguards to artificial intelligence. Genetic editing, though, is quite different. We have the ability to make ourselves stronger, better, to design our baby age. And I completely, fully support this. Now, certain countries around the world have done moratoriums on these types of technology, including America, like, oh, let's be careful of, changing eye colors, be careful of changing hair color. Let's be careful of, making it so that somebody's not going to get cancer when they're age 40 because we've messed with the embryo. Well, I completely support the libertarian perspective of just letting the designer baby age happen. And hopefully we can create better people. We can create an opportunity where the human species can improve himself and has the freedom to do so. It's not like we're forcing this technology on anyone. We just want the right to do it. But all these things combined have made an interesting vice presidential campaign for myself, as I've gone out and done interviews endlessly and wrote about this stuff endlessly. Reason just covered me a lot of my ideas on privacy and facial recognition recently as another whole, big challenging subject that's really starting to affect us. Unfortunately, the coronavirus has made it so that the convention is going to be quite different. It'll be a nominating process online. But if you want to find out more about my work, you can just Google my name, Zoltan Istvan, and libertarianism, and you'll find, I've written an enormous amount of articles, and I've written around 250 opinion pieces in the last 5-6 years. So there's certainly an amount, and definitely look at some of my latest New York Times pieces. And I think what I'll do is, I'm not sure. I don't have my clock on my iPhone here, but I'm wondering how long I've spoken. It looks like I've spoken about 20, maybe 25 minutes. There's a timer. And so I'll be happy to take a few questions if there are any, but thanks so much for hearing me talk about transhumanism.
Of course. I watched a recent interview you did with Johnny Boston. I think it was on just the 12th, just the other day. That was really interesting. Transhumanism just blows my mind. You know what I mean? It's crazy huge and amazing to think about. And one of the things somebody mentioned in one of the comments, and this is one of the things that I first jumped to when you start talking about brain implants, is who and what has access to that brain implant and where is it being manufactured and by who and who can manipulate it. So obviously the first thing libertarians and people in this comment section goes to is, can the government get control of that? Can they start mind manipulating you?
Well, and that's the big danger. And when people come up to me and say, Zoltan, yeah, because I have a lot of younger sort of supporters, whatnot. What field should I go into? What profession should I study? These kinds of profession should I do? I always say, look, it's going to be cybersecurity. And the reason is that we're going to get these brain implants. I'm not saying you're going to. What I'm saying is Elon Musk and there's other companies like Brian Johnson Colonel. I live in Silicon Valley. I mean, we have literally billions of dollars flowing into these technologies. They're going to come because they're functional from a point of view of being faster and competing against robots. For example, right now, Wall Street's losing a ton of its mid-level traders because algorithms can be done in AI. If we can't combine our brains and our thoughts with artificial intelligence here in the next 5 or 10 years, we will all be replaced when it comes to working. So the best way to fight that is to actually sort of merge with machines. Now, how do we make sure that the security remains our own thoughts? How can we keep not only just the government out, but other people we don't like, enemies, these kinds of things? This is why cybersecurity is going to be the most important, I feel, going forward. I think, but even though it's very challenging for libertarians to say, oh, that someone can get hold of it, you have to understand, like all technologies, if you choose to, through fear, not engage in this technology, and your neighbor, for example, does, and he gets the better job because he knows how to do all these different things that much quicker, that much more functionally, then libertarians will be left behind. I think libertarians should say, let's move forward with this and let's emphasize the privacy, the security, the safeguards against this technology, but utilize it for our best interest, for the species' best interest.
Very good point. I would just fear, unlike my phone, which I can destroy or get rid of. I'm sorry. If it's in your brain, it's a little bit more difficult to get rid of if things go sideways. But I appreciate that you addressing that. I really am interested also in the exoskeletons. Isn't there already some of that function for some folks?
Yes, in fact, one of the most emotional things that I've seen in the last 6 years is seeing someone in a wheelchair who had never been out of a wheelchair since he'd been in an accident 20 years ago, literally on stage, get out after having this kind of apparatus put on him. And if you've never seen that and you've seen somebody suffer in a wheelchair, let's say, oh, I was in a terrible motorcycle accident, I can't get out. And then one day they get out and they can start walking. This is really what transhumanism is about. It's a humanitarian movement. We're after improving your health and improving your longevity. That's it. It's not like we're trying to become great gods or something like that. We're actually just want to make it so people don't suffer and people don't have to, spend their lives in a wheelchair or die from cancer or die because of some kind of terrible tragedy, fixed diseases. That's a main thing about transhumanism. But getting exoskeleton technology and getting people out of wheelchairs and mobile again is incredibly important. Here's a good fact for people to know. About 30% of people around the world have mobility issues. And that's because many of them are senior citizens, including your mothers and fathers. It's not just people in in wheelchairs. So there's a very real need for exoskeleton technology. But it gets even better than that. We're going to have 80-year-olds climbing Mount Everest probably within 10 years because they're going to be able to use this technology to climb anywhere because they're, after all, not doing much work. It's all the machine parts. And, the military is leading a lot with this technology, but it's private companies that are bringing it to the people themselves, to the disabled people, to veterans and stuff like that. And I mean, can you imagine? There's, my New York Times article, part of my article talked about probably within 10 to 15 years, we will have exoskeleton technology that allows us to run so fast, we will run on water. You need to run 78 miles per hour to be able to run on water. And that's how fast these things can move your legs. So you're going to be maybe doing marathons across lakes in 10 or 15 years. That's where this technology goes.
I hear I can catch a cheetah. That's all I hear when I hear 78 miles an hour. I'm down.
There's some people talking about the new big game hunting. It's not this
Mm.
shoot with a gun. It's with a knife, and you go and try to catch big game.
Wow. That would be different. That's a whole new take on big game hunting.
Yeah,
Good
no, I
luck.
mean, transhumanism is gonna bring in a brand new world of sports and activities.
That's for sure. I mean, I can't even imagine. You're talking about climbing Mount Everest. I imagine there'll be some sort of flying apparatus. I mean, why not?
They already have some. If you've seen, they attach these rockets to their arms. I mean, we're coming to that James Bond age where that's out there. It's just really a matter that, unfortunately, the government's getting in the way because of all the the federal aviation issues, not only with drones, but also just with people that want to fly. We've now for about 5 years had these jetpack suits where you can put on and very comfortably fly, to work. The problem, though, again, is always the government interfering and saying, "Oh, you're interrupting all the different waves, and there's too many wires." But we have so many incredible technologies. It's really the best way to move the transhumanist movement forward is actually to try to curb government intervention, because they simply want to stifle everything.
So I'm not totally familiar with what the laws are with drones. I know that I don't know anything. I assume that if one flies over your yard and you smack it down, that's within your right. But
I'm not so sure about that question, but I do know that every single now city, or at least most of them, have different laws, so you can't fly in airspace, and there's privacy issues. But the problem is that for drone operators, getting this forward so that you can order like a pizza and getting it to your thing, we should have been doing this long ago. But it's been the government that's been getting in the way of doing these things, and that's a big problem, because I think it's really when you talk about economics, you don't want to keep stifling innovation just because it doesn't fit with your parameters on what the world's supposed to be like. The idea is capitalism in a free market takes place. It knows what it's doing. And unfortunately, drones have been all sorts of issues now with trying to deliver things. Some countries already allow it, but America seems to be kind of on the backtrack because we have all these federal aviation rules and other privacy rules and stuff like that. And of course, some of the rules might make sense, but broadly speaking, when the government gets involved, it tends to stifle innovation.
Yes, we see that at every turn, unfortunately. So yeah, I wish I knew more about that. That's because it seems like an arbitrary rule because we said so. Because
Yes.
It's messing stuff up, and just take our word for it.
Well, that's it. And I think a lot of what government does is arbitrary. They're just it doesn't fit in their little box of thinking, but they forget that capitalism never fits in a box. Capitalism is constantly pushing the edge, and that's what it does. I mean, laissez-faire free markets is something that's always out of the box, and that's why it succeeds. And without that, you have no growth, no innovation, and frankly, that's kind of why China started to kick America's butt. It's because we're not allowing innovation to thrive like we should. And I'm really worried that we're going to wake up here in 5-10 years and America will no longer be the real dominant country in the world if it already hasn't happened. And that really bums me out. And being dominant comes from innovation. That's how you move the world forward. You move it because you're the creator of artificial intelligence. You're the creator of the most radical genetic editing experience. Right now, China has been doing the most radical genetic editing experiments. This is unfortunate for American democracy and America as a whole.
I absolutely agree. So, sir, where can folks find you? And let's see if we've got any questions from the audience.
Yeah, if you're people want to know, my political website for the vice presidency is Zoltan2020.com. That's Zoltan2020.com. My personal website with all my interviews, I've been on Joe Rogan's show, been on many different shows, a lot of different libertarian ones as well. So go to ZoltanIstvan.com and you can check out that Dave Rubin, all those fun things. So there's ZoltanIstvan.com is kind of the personal site, and Zoltan2020 is the political site.
Oh, you've been on Dave Rubin too?
Yeah, I know Dave Rubin pretty well.
Awesome. Yeah. He's a sweetheart. I got to meet him here when he came in to speak last year or year before. So that's great. I don't have any questions for you at the moment. I do want to thank you for coming. This stuff just blows my mind. It just like, I can't even comprehend. I have like a little piece of titanium in here, but that doesn't touch what you guys are talking about. Obviously, this is old school.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, just to give you an idea how far this movement is going, and then I'll let you go. We have biohackers that are probably within 1 to 2 years of taking off a limb electively, like a normally functioning arm, and putting on robotic arms that are already tied to your neural system, because you can already start playing guitar, play drums, pick up beer, do many things with your hands and your limbs. And I'm not talking about a disabled person. I'm like a veteran who might need it. I'm talking about people who want to do this because they're starting to upgrade themselves. And probably within 10 years, we'll have a cyborg arm that, for example, can throw a football better than any football player out there. And we're entering an age that's incredibly complicated, challenging, but also very revolutionary and exciting if you like that kind of science fiction angle. And I think, like, if I leave you with just one last thing, the libertarian kind of movement has an opportunity to take the ball here, because a lot of the Democrats, Republicans won't. They're just kind of too scared, and really run with this idea of science and technology leading the world forward. And it should be free. We should be letting it do that. And this is an opportunity for us to, really, I think, capture new friends, new supporters, and grow the movement. Because I can tell you, the very last thing you want is for a nation like China to control the transhumanist movement, or a very conservative, closed-minded government to control the transhumanist movement. It won't grow, and it'll be all under a big ball of control. What you really need is kind of a libertarian future that says, let's let all this science and technology happen, let's see where it goes, and let's let people make decisions for themselves on it.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure to meet and talk with you. I hope to see you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we're going to reset. Be back with John McAfee on Zoom. Thanks.